How ideas spread. How humans have always shared news, trust, and influence. A few weeks ago, I found myself thinking about the ancient city of Ephesus. I know you were too, probably, but not in the theological sense of it, and not even the letter written in the Bible to the church there. I was thinking about communication, about how a message moved through the world before modern media existed. So here we have this letter. Apostle Paul is in jail, and he has this letter dictated that becomes the letter to Ephesus, or the book of Ephesians. And this letter was written by hand, carried by a person, read aloud to a small group, repeated in homes, marketplaces, workshops, docks, roads, other relationships. One person told another, and they told another. A merchant carried the idea to another city. A family repeated it over dinner, and a traveler discussed it at the port. And slowly something began to spread. And this got me thinking about something I see constantly with startups and early stage businesses. Many of them are obsessed with reaching strangers, followers, algorithms, broad audience, mass attention. Meanwhile, they overlook the people already around them: family and friends, coworkers, neighbors, local groups, former colleagues, church members, people who already know their name. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something: that for most of human history, nearly everything important spread through small relational networks. News, religion, commerce, stories, warnings, reputation, political movements, business. Almost all of it moved from person to person long before it ever reached the masses. Technology changed the speed of communication, but I'm not convinced it fundamentally changed how human trust works. So let's talk about before mass communication. Long before newspapers and radio, television, social media, human beings still needed to answer a basic question: how do we tell one another things? And the answer was surprisingly simple: people. Anthropologists and historians have long noted that the early human communities depended heavily on oral communication. The stories and warnings and customs and knowledge were passed through tribes and families around fires, at meals, during travel, and through ritual. Before written language became widespread, memory itself became the cultural tool, and stories were repeated because they mattered and they kept you alive. Knowledge survived because communities carried it together. Even after writing systems emerged, most communication still remained relational. Many people throughout history could not read. Messages had to be spoken aloud, carried physically, interpreted by trusted individuals, or repeated through local networks. In ancient villages, marketplaces functioned not only as centers of commerce, but as communication hubs. Travelers brought news from distant regions. Merchants carried information along with goods. Sailors brought stories from other ports. And reputation moved through conversation. The local blacksmith became known because people talked. A baker became trusted because neighbors recommended them. A craftsman survived because families spoke well of his work. This was not called marketing, it was simply how human communication worked. The village actually was the original network. When we think of communication today, we often think about scale, followers, and views, and reach, and audience size. But for most of human history, communication happened at a very human scale inside villages, tribes, households, religious communities, trade groups, neighborhoods. And something important happened inside these smaller circles. Trust formed. People learned who were reliable and who exaggerated, who delivered and who didn't, and who could be counted on. Because life mattered at that point to know of those things. And they mattered because human beings rarely made decisions in isolation. We learn socially, we evaluate socially, we imitate socially. Even now, people still ask friends for recommendations before choosing a contractor or a restaurant, a mechanic, a church, a doctor, or a coffee shop. Modern technology did not erase that instinct, it simply layered new tools over ancient behavior. Roads and ports and messengers. As civilizations grew, communication networks expanded, road systems changed history. The Roman road system, for example, connected vast portions of the empire and allowed goods and military movement, political authority, and ideas to travel further and faster than before. But even then, communication still moved through human carriers, messengers, travelers, merchants, sailors, teachers, soldiers, families. The city of Ephesus, where we started, is a fascinating example. At the time of this writing of Paul, Ephesus was one of the largest cities in the Roman world, likely holding hundreds of thousands of people. Some say it had 300,000 people at its height. It was wealthy, it was crowded, it was religious, it was commercial, and it was deeply connected to trade routes. And ideas flowed constantly through the city. And yet, even there, communication remained relational. Letters were carried physically, messages were read aloud to small groups, ideas spread through households and trade relationships and trusted communities. Christianity itself spread this way. Not initially through giant institutions or mass broadcasting, but through people, houses, churches, meals, friendships, sitting around a fire, merchants, families. A message moved from one small circle to another. And then something happened. The printing press changed everything. The printing press certainly did change everything. Here comes one of the great communication revelations or revolutions in human history, the printing press. Johann Gutenberg's movable type press dramatically expanded the ability to produce information at scale. Books that once required painstaking manual copying could suddenly be produced in far larger quantities, and ideas accelerated. The printed Bible became enormously significant, not only religiously, but culturally, because information could now move more broadly through society. Literacy expanded, pamphlets spread, political movements accelerated, knowledge became more portable. And for the first time in history, communication began shifting from primarily local transmission towards scalable distribution. That trend continued through newspapers, magazines, the telegraph systems, radio, television, mass advertising, and flyers, pamphlets. Eventually, businesses learned they could speak directly to enormous audiences, and mass communication became normal. And to be clear, this wasn't a bad thing. Modern communication technologies have allowed education to spread and emergency information to travel quickly, businesses to scale, creators to reach global audiences, and communities to form across geography. We are wise to use these tools, but I do think something subtle happened along the way. Many businesses began assuming that broad reach itself was the goal. The modern startup problem. I work with many startups and early stage businesses, and one pattern appears over and over again. A business launches and immediately begins to try to reach strangers. They start asking, how do I grow followers? How do I go viral? How do I beat algorithms? How do I scale attention? And they may barely be communicating at all with existing relationships, local communities, past coworkers, neighbors, former customers, local business owners, or referral sources. In other words, they've often neglected the very relational networks through which human beings have historically spread trust and influence. I'm not saying business should avoid broader marketing, far from it. I use social media. I write online. I understand the importance of visibility. But I think many startup businesses accidentally reverse the historical pattern. For most centuries, things spread from the inside out. Today, many businesses attempt to begin from the outside in. The circle problem. One of the most useful ways I've begun thinking about this is through three circles. Circle one, the people closest to you. These are family and friends and neighbors, coworkers, existing relationships, and people who already know your name. Circle two, these include referrals, friends of friends, local organizations, partnerships, community overlap, and adjacent networks. And circle three, the broader public, that is, strangers, cold audience, mass social media, broad advertising, large scale reach. There's nothing wrong with circle three. The problem is that many businesses ignore circle one and circle two while obsessing over circle three. I want to say that again. The problem isn't that many businesses ignore circles one and two while observing over circle three or obsessing over circle three. Historically, that is backwards. Most durable businesses become known locally before they become known broadly. Trust accumulated before scale did. Now, technology did not eliminate human nature, and this is an important distinction. I do not believe modern communication destroyed relational communication. In many ways, it amplified it. Look carefully at how people still behave online. People still share podcasts with friends or text recommendations or forward newsletters. They join niche communities. They trust creators who feel personal. They buy from people who they feel connected to. They ask for referrals in Facebook groups. They follow recommendations from people they know. So even inside digital systems, humans still navigate information relationally. The tools changed, the scale changed, the speed changed. But underneath it all, human beings still appear to trust through smaller circles. And that really matters, especially for small businesses. You probably need fewer people than you think. This may be one of the most important realizations for startup owners. Many businesses psychologically operate as though they need massive audiences to survive. But in reality, many small businesses would be transformed by 10 excellent clients, by 4 strong referral partners, by 1 trusted community connection, a handful of repeat customers, and a small but loyal network. For instance, a local CPA does not necessarily need millions of followers. A consultant often grows through trust. A contractor grows through reputation. A therapist grows through referrals. A coffee shop grows through familiarity and community. And historically, this was normal. The village baker did not need global awareness, she needed local trust. And what this means today, I think modern businesses absolutely use websites, emails, social media, digital marketing, podcasts, and online communities. But perhaps we should think differently about what these tools are actually for. Maybe the goal is not merely to broadcast. Maybe the goal is to strengthen and extend relationships. Maybe the internet did not replace human networks. Maybe it simply gave them new infrastructure. And maybe the businesses that thrive long term are not merely the loudest, but maybe they're the ones that become deeply known and deeply trusted within connected circles of people. Let me give you my final thoughts. For most of human history, news, trust, commerce, reputation, and influence spread through small relational communities, families and villages, ports, markets, household churches, neighborhoods, friendships. Human beings learned through people. The modern world has given us extraordinary communication tools, and we should use them wisely. But perhaps the future of communication is not abandoning technology. Perhaps it is remembering what humans have always trusted inside of it. So before you spend all your energy trying to reach thousands of strangers, it may be worth asking a simpler question. Have you become known, trusted, and useful within the circles already closest to you? Because historically, that is where most things begin to spread.